Well, let's turn to Labour now, shall we, and find out what they made of that interview with the Chancellor. We can speak now to the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, who joins us now from Leeds. Thank you very much for being on the programme this morning. Jeremy Hunt telling me there that everyone is going to be paying a little bit more tax after next week. Do you think he's got the right plan?
Well, we'll see what he comes up with on Thursday, but I am determined to hold him to account for having a fair tax system. And what I would like to see on Thursday, and what I would be doing if I was Chancellor of the Exchequer, is closing some of the tax loopholes, which mean today that some of the wealthiest in society and some of the biggest businesses are not paying their fair share of taxes. That's why, for example, when the Prime Minister flies off to the G20 summit today, he should be committing to closing some of those loopholes that mean big global multinationals not paying their fair share of tax. There is already a global agreement, but we haven't legislated for it here in the UK, and it could bring in £7 billion a year, as well as helping some of our smaller businesses and high street businesses. As you know, Sophie, I've been banging on about the windfall tax on big energy companies since the beginning of this year, and the Prime Minister, when he was Chancellor, slow-pedalled on that. We still think that you could raise an additional £50 billion through extending the windfall tax by 2 years, by backdating it to the beginning of January, when those windfalls, those profits of war, started coming onto the balance sheets of the energy companies, by getting rid of some of the loopholes that mean companies like Shell are not even paying any of the government's energy profits levy, and extending it to some of the electricity generators. So there are fair choices that the Chancellor could be making this week, rather than just putting all of that burden on ordinary working people who are already struggling with the highest inflation that any of us have experienced for 40 years, and now risk more of their money going in taxes rather than having it for the weekly food shop, the higher mortgage payments, and everything else that is facing people right now.
I take your point that Labour was, of course, the first to call for the windfall tax on energy firms, but it does look like, according to reports, that the government is going to be extending that next week. Jeremy Hunt was also talking about the cost
Sophie,
of...
let me just say on a windfall tax, I hope the government does extend it, but I hope they do what Labour are calling for, which is ensuring that the tax paid by energy companies here is similar to what it is in Norway, and that we get rid of those loopholes that mean for more investment in fossil fuels, those energy companies can offset the windfall tax. That is not right. Companies should be paying their fair share, and that would ease the pressure on the tax burden for ordinary working people.
OK, the question that I was going to ask was that Jeremy Hunt was also talking about the cost of the energy support package, saying that with the rise in energy bills, it's going to be like funding a second NHS. So I just wonder what Labour's plan is. How long do you think the energy price guarantee should last? And is there a point when actually it should be targeted at the most vulnerable, pensioners, those on low incomes, rather than just everybody?
Well, when Keir Starmer and me set out our plans for the autumn and winter months, and we did that in August, at that time the Conservatives were all saying that they didn't believe in handouts. They're constantly playing catch-up with what Labour are putting forward. And, of course, the new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, would reduce the support that was available to people. Now, look, we'll see where we are going into the new year and where energy prices are. But Labour have always been very clear that the windfall tax on energy companies should be used to try and keep bills as low as possible for pensioners, for families, and also for businesses. And, you know, I speak to many businesses, including here in Leeds. And in fact, I was talking to one business owner yesterday who said that she wasn't even able to get a contract for energy. So she doesn't know from 1 week to the next what she's paying, because she's now just on a floating deal tracking energy prices. That's incredibly difficult for her and her business, because energy costs are a big part of it. So we need more certainty and clarity from the government about what is going to be available after April.
You're not giving the certainty and clarity either, though, are you? Because I just asked, you know, firstly, if you think it should be targeted, and secondly, how long it would last for under Labour.
Well, look, I've made this commitment that we would extend the windfall tax on those big oil and gas companies. And we've always said that if you do that, there's more money to help people with their gas and electricity bills. And the government have always slow-pedalled on the support that is needed. It's why also Labour came up with a package for some of our most energy-intensive industries who are being put at a comparative disadvantage compared with some of our international competitors who are being supported. And the government has never come up with a package to help them.
In September, you said on GMB, austerity is not the right approach. We will oppose any cuts to public services. Is that still your position, that you will oppose any cuts to public services?
Public services are already on their knees. 7 million people are waiting for an NHS operation or support. You know, if you look at our schools, our class sizes are increasing. Teachers are increasingly having to fund the basics out of their own money. And so I don't believe that austerity 2.0, after the austerity that we've gone through after the last 12 years, is the right approach, which is why I'm arguing for two things, both fairer choices on taxes, but also, crucially, a plan for growth. Because one of the reasons that we are in this mess we're in, and why we have been so uniquely exposed in Britain with one of the lowest growths of any of the OECD, the major industrialised economies, is because we've just been languishing in the league tables in growth over the last decade. So we need a growth plan. It's why I've set out Labour's Green Prosperity Plan, because I genuinely believe that Britain can be a global leader in some of the industries of the future, from green hydrogen to tidal energy, floating offshore wind, carbon capture and storage, creating good jobs in all parts of Britain, helping keep people's bills low and also boosting our energy security. It's why we've set out our plans to make Britain the best place to start and grow a business, and reforming business rates to help our small businesses and our high streets thrive. We need all of that because that's what brings in the money to pay for our public services. And the problem is, now after 12 years of Conservative government, growth is on the floor and inflation is going through the roof.
I'm going to jump in just because I've got a couple more questions that I do want to squeeze in before I have to let you go. Jeremy Hunt was saying on public sector pay and on strikes, if we gave everyone inflation-proof pay rises, then inflation would stay. Nurses currently striking, they want an above inflation pay rise of 17%. Do you think that's affordable?
I'm not going to pluck numbers out of the air, but it should be a badge of shame for the Conservatives. Well, it's up to the pay review bodies to work with the unions, but it's a badge of shame that for the first time in their history, nurses are looking to go on strike. This didn't happen when Labour was in government because we valued and respected public service workers, including those who work in our NHS, who have given so much to our country these last few years. We've got huge recruitment challenges in the NHS, including amongst nurses, workload issues, issues of stress. We've got nurses that are going to food banks. So we need to support our NHS workers, including our nurses, and that means fair but affordable pay rises. I'm not going to cut into the pay review negotiations that are going on, but the Secretary of State for Health should meet with the nurses and the nursing unions and work out a deal and show some respect to these crucial public service workers.
I've just got one more question to squeeze in. Over the summer, you were pictured chatting to Rishi Sunak at a Bloomberg drinks event. It was shortly before he was made Prime Minister. What were you talking about?
Well, we were at a reception and I shadowed Rishi Sunak for about a year and a half. We were talking about a number of things, but it also particularly actually about our children. We've both got young children. We were talking about the influence that they have on our politics. I was also, you know, commiserating with him on losing the leadership contest. He did lose that contest to Liz Truss. He's now Prime Minister. but he's not willing to face the people, there should be a general election because he has no mandate. He was not chosen by either his members and certainly not by the country. There's no mandate for the cuts and the tax increases that they are putting through now. The people should have a choice about who their Prime Minister and who their Chancellor is. That will only come through a general election, and that's why we desperately need one to have a mandate for the decisions that are being made in our name.
Thank you very much indeed, Rachel Reeves. The safe space, I feel, talk about children in the political arena.